Dying Like the Beast on Steam Deck thanks to Techland for providing a code of the game. So this game released a few hours ago and it's Steam Deck verified on day one, which sometimes is good to see, some other times it's pretty sus, especially on UE5 stuff, but this game is a custom engine, thank God. So let's get into it right away. Alright, so due to this game being verified, I'm going to try the default settings since most people are going to just launch the game and start playing. We got dynamic resolution disabled, same with the FPS limiter. Upscaling type TAAU on performance, which I'm guessing is half resolution, in this case 400p. Sharpness 50%, FrameGen on FSR, so yeah, FrameGen by default, you can turn it off, but again, default settings first, and an FOV of 57 degrees that you can increase, which is good to see. And I want to thank Instant Gaming for sponsoring this video. Instant Gaming is a website where you can buy PC, PlayStation, Xbox and Nintendo Switch games for a cheaper price with 24/7 support. You can find old and new games such as Hell is Us for $37.68, Chronos The New Dawn for $47.25. I'm talking about older games, we got Dying Light 2 Stay Human for $20.84, Assassin's Creed Shadows for $42.24, Ghost of Tsushima Director's Cut, which I highly recommend for Steam Deck. And due to this partnership, we're giving away one free game to one of you guys each month from the entirety of Instant Gaming. Just hit participate, follow myself and Instant Gaming in social media. And thanks again to Instant Gaming for sponsoring this video. Let's continue. So yeah, those are the default settings. Again, FSR FrameGen is enabled and I noticed it right away. I'm in this area because you started a very closed environment in a lab, and honestly I don't think that's a great way to show what the game is doing when it comes to performance. But Dying Light 2 ran pretty damn well in my opinion, but again by default this is with FrameGen, and usually FrameGen, as always, I recommend it with at least 45 FPS. I mean that's not great either, but it's better than nothing. And yep, what I'm noticing is that there is a very aggressive upscaling, and I notice the input lag, which again, you might want to play it like this because it looks smoother, but the responsiveness of the controls, it doesn't fully convince me. Personally, I wouldn't use FrameGen, at least in this title. Another thing that I noticed with the TAAU, despite being on performance, the game looks very crisp, which is weird for me to see, because I'm used to UE5 games looking like Vaseline is all over the screen with the TAA solution. Again, it's not perfect, you can still notice it's a pretty low resolution. But another thing that I noticed is that there's no settings that we can tweak on Steam Deck other than upscaling. They're probably doing a custom configuration for shadows, draw distance and all that. But we got soft shadows at a decent resolution, even flashlight shadows. So shadows are looking pretty good, but I did notice that the draw distance is quite limited. If you look at this part of the screen as an example, the shadows, some of the geometry popping in front of you. But again, that's pretty far away still. What happens when we turn off FrameGen? Well, I'm so glad you asked. Here we go with FrameGen off, and we save. And this will give us 30 FPS. So again, considering this is a new game and that the game is verified, I think 30 FPS on a new game with these visuals is fine. Honestly, I was expecting way worse when it comes to the visuals of the game on Steam Deck, and I think they did it pretty well. We have screen space reflections, we got ambient occlusion, pretty good shadows, pretty good draw distance. So far so good. Look at the game on the Steam Deck preset. Again, you cannot change the preset without, I mean, only the resolution is something that you can change natively in the options menu. But what do you guys think? Do you think the game looks good? I think it looks pretty sharp despite the lower resolution. Definitely better than a UE5 game on performance upscaling when it comes to the edges. A kick! This is Sparta! See ya! Physics seem to be back as well. The second game had terrible physics when it came out. And when it comes to texture quality, it seems to be decent. Nothing special when it comes to textures. But that walkie-talkie looks pretty damn good. Okay, now we're fighting the Reaper, and we're dropping to 20 FPS. So that's probably why they put frame gen in there. Yeah, probably happening because of this. Yeah, this how to say this? These leaves on the ground, maybe. Something to keep in mind. This section can drop into the upper 20s, although it drops less than before restarting the game. I'm guessing it's those leaves falling again. It's pretty intensive part, and those leaves seem to be interacting with the enemy. Yeah, in a very subtle manner. So, but this part is definitely dropping frames pretty hard. I guess again this is probably why they enabled frame gen by default, which I think is pretty disingenuous, honestly, due to the extra input lag. But hey, let's see once we get ahead of this boss fight. World, quite a few enemies in the distance. I forgot to fall in the correct part. But out here, seems to be good. If we're targeting 30 FPS, but I wouldn't go any higher than this. I think the default settings that they put are okay, except for frame gen. Honestly, I don't like the input lag, but it will look smoother than playing it without it. But again, smoother, but less responsive. So visuals will look smooth, inputs will feel delayed. That's basically the trade-off, especially if the base frame rate is like here into the 30s. But so far only that boss fight made the game drop. And the water looks great, what the hell? There's also screen space reflections. Yep, I can see them there. So they didn't sacrifice the reflections on Steam Deck. But I think the game is looking pretty good. The thing that doesn't convince me entirely is the frame gen. The frame gen being there by default. I kinda get it. There's also some stuttering when running. Yeah. Maybe we are memory limited actually. We're using 6 gigs of VRAM and 13.2 as system RAM. We only have 16, so we're going way over the system RAM limits. So that kinda sucks, honestly. Also when there's foliage close to the camera, that's when it drops the hardest. That's probably why in the boss fight we were dropping. There were a few trees around, plus those leaves flying, but a bigger amount of them than usual. Probably with a restart of the game, we can reset that RAM usage, but again, that tells me maybe memory leak is going on. But again, usually the verified status is given to basically any game that kinda works. The thing is, when you get into a car, it's probably going to be an issue. That's crazy. And if you're using frame gen and you get those stutters, well, the stutters will last longer because it's also duplicating the frames when it's stuttering. So, yep, you'll get a couple extra seconds of the stutter. But hey, it's mostly into the 30s, only in that boss fight and some parts of outside. It's when it dropped the hardest. So now what I'm going to do is show you how it looks on the smaller screen, because yeah, it looks very pixelated blown out on a monitor with my capture card, which again, to be expected. But still, I think it's good to show you that because it's a better representation of what the game actually looks like. Alright, so now in handheld, you can see battery life, you can see basically everything that you want to see. Here we go again. And since I restarted the game for this, the stutters should be lessened if there's a memory leak. But you'll see that RAM and VRAM, yeah, no, it still happens. That's a shame. Yeah, they need to fix that. Because you'll be running around the open world quite a bit. Let's be honest here. That's kind of the point, right?
I know this part.
But hey, it runs way better than I expected. The thing is, in that boss fight, when it dropped really hard into the mid-20s, that's usually when you need the better frame rate the most, to say it in some way. So in this case, what would I do? I would lock it to 30 FPS, first of all. There's also a dynamic resolution option, but that one wasn't perfect. It was hard locking the game to 20 FPS for me. So there I used the 30 FPS lock from the SteamOS settings. But again, if you look at it in the smaller screen, it doesn't look as bad. It actually, as I said at the beginning of the video, in my opinion, holds up better when it comes to image quality in comparison to a UE5 game at the same resolution, because the game told us to go to performance upscaling with TAAU, and while that's pretty common, again, as an example in comparison to a UE5 game, on UE5 it's like heavy Vaseline on the screen. Here it's actually more of a shimmering effect. So the staircase effect, you call it, that the edges have those lines that you can see the pixelation. So in the smaller screen it actually holds up better than UE5's solution, in my opinion, because it looks crisper, and being a smaller screen, a 7-inch screen, it really isn't that obvious. It actually looks like a clearer image overall. I mean, you can notice it's a low resolution. At the end of the day, it's still 400p. But again, I think it's completely playable like this. The game looks good. We have soft shadows. We have a good pop-in distance. The draw distance of the objects is pretty good. We still have reflections, screen space, that are pretty far away as well, as you can see there in the water. So I think they did a good balance of visuals, because it's not like, oh yeah, let's just turn off shadows, turn off reflections, turn off draw distance, or whatever. And the effects also are completely fine. Everything works as you would expect. Yeah, even the gore. You still have those effects just fine. It's just that first boss fight that I had an issue with. But maybe with a 30 FPS lock, we get a better experience. What really, again, just scares me a bit is that if later on in the game we're going to run into a more difficult to run boss fight, maybe at night. So would I call this verified? Well, I think it's more verified than many games that claim to be verified. Looking at you, Elder Scrolls Oblivion remaster. This runs way better than that, and looks better when it comes to, well, image quality, when it comes to resolution, and when it comes to settings and stability. There's way less stutters than many UE5 games, which I guess is not very difficult. The bar is set pretty damn low. But would I play this on Steam Deck? Yeah, I'll lock it to 30 FPS, keep it with the default settings but disable frame gen, and that should be a good experience. Yeah, some drops below 30, but it was like only that boss fight, then it was pretty solid. And those traversing, and that stuttering when traversing, I'm going to check it on the PC version on a desktop PC as well, and I'll update you in the pinned comment. But I don't think that's a Steam Deck specific issue. It's probably game assets streaming in, and we're also very heavily memory limited. We only have 16 GB of RAM. That's shared between VRAM and system RAM. And we're using way more than 16 gigs in total, so it's using the virtual memory, so that makes the game slow down. But overall, if this is the only way you have to play the game, sure, go ahead, it works. But personally, I like using this when I'm not on my desktop PC that is super powerful, and I want to just play a little bit of the game, get that save on the cloud, then continue on my main PC. It doesn't feel bad to play at all. And I think, again, the visuals are acceptable, considering this is a Steam Deck. I'm excited to check this out actually on a more powerful handheld, like the ROG Ally. But even driving feels completely fine. Despite all those enemies getting blood splatter all over the screen, it seems to be holding up. But again, once I try it on PC as well, and I'm more familiar with the settings, I'm going to see if I can tweak it differently on Steam Deck. But I think the developers did a good job with the default settings. There's a good amount of sacrifices, but I think those sacrifices are worth it. if it means 30 FPS 99% of the time. And this looks like an Alan Wake 1 environment, this part. Funny. Anyway, I'll keep playing and update you guys if anything changes, but so far I think it's pretty decent on Steam Deck. They did a great job with it, and I'm gonna see ya next time with future patches if it improves. Bye guys, thanks for watching, and with the default settings on the OLED, 2.5 hours of battery, on the LCD, probably more like 90 to 100 minutes. Thanks guys, thanks for watching,